When someone close to you treats you without respect, it can feel like a heavy stone pressing on your heart. And when that someone is your son-in-law, it often hurts even more. Because marriage ties are not just about two people, they bind entire families together. You may have welcomed him into your home, shared meals, celebrated holidays, and hoped he would treat you with warmth and gratitude. Yet suddenly you find yourself facing sharp words, dismissive looks, or a tone that leaves you feeling invisible. It is natural to wonder, why does this happen? Did I do something wrong? Let me tell you gently, it is not a reflection of your worth. As we age, respect becomes a deeper need, not out of pride, but because dignity is the last and most precious gift we want to protect. When you were younger, perhaps in your 40s or 50s, you had energy to argue back, to defend yourself quickly, maybe even to brush it off with humor. But in your 70s or 80s, that energy feels different. The body is slower to recover from conflict, and the soul seeks peace more than victory. That doesn't mean you are weaker. It means you have lived long enough to know that endless battles rarely bring real satisfaction. And so, the absence of respect can feel sharper now than it did years ago because your heart is tuned to a different kind of harmony. I remember talking with Elena, who is 76. She told me that when her son-in-law raised his voice during a family dinner, she felt a sting much stronger than she expected. Not because the words were cruel in themselves, but because in that moment she realized she wasn't seen as the wise elder she had become. She said it wasn't about the argument, it was about being dismissed. Her story is not unusual, and perhaps you too have felt that sense of being overlooked, as though the years of life and love you carry are invisible. But here is the truth. Your value doesn't disappear just because someone fails to honor it. The years you have lived, the lessons you carry, the love you have given, those are treasures no one can take from you. Still, I know it's not easy. You may ask yourself quietly, how do I want to be remembered in this family? Do I want my grandchildren to see me as someone who loses temper easily, or as someone who embodies calm strength? These questions are not meant to burden you, but to guide you gently toward the image of yourself that feels right in your heart. You have the power to choose that image, even if others forget to treat you as you deserve. Sometimes simply remembering that you are not defined by another's mood brings a little relief. And maybe, just maybe, it opens a door for a more peaceful way forward. I'd love to know where you're reading this from. Share your city or country in the comments. It helps us feel connected as one supportive community. When someone disrespects you, the first impulse is often to defend yourself immediately. Words rise quickly to your lips, your heart beats faster, and your whole body prepares for a battle you did not choose. Yet with time and experience, you begin to see that the strongest answer is not always the loudest. As we age, something within us shifts. We discover that our true power often lies in restraint, in the pause before we speak, in the ability to carry ourselves with calm dignity even when others lose theirs. It might sound simple, but silence, when chosen deliberately, is not weakness, it is strength. I once spoke with Margaret, a 72-year-old woman who had lived through this very situation. One evening, during a family dinner, her son-in-law snapped at her sharply over something trivial, the kind of cutting remark that lingers long after it is spoken. Margaret felt her chest tighten with hurt. For a moment, she wanted to reply in kind, to match his tone with her own. But instead, she breathed deeply, put down her fork, and quietly excused herself from the table. She went into another room, sat for a while, and let her emotions settle. Later, without anger or bitterness, she returned to the table and continued the evening. To her surprise, her son-in-law came to her later that night and apologized. "I'm sorry," he said. "I was stressed and I took it out on you." Margaret told me, "In that moment, I realized my silence was louder than shouting. My calmness gave him space to see his mistake." Her story reminds us that when we hold on to composure, we do not deny our feelings, we honor them differently.
But how do you practice this kind of calm strength in your own life? First, remember to breathe. When you feel disrespected, pause for 3 slow breaths before responding. Second, give yourself permission to step away. There is no shame in leaving a tense conversation, even if just for a few minutes. Third, when you do speak, use a neutral and steady tone. Instead of attacking, you might say, "I will talk with you later," or simply, "I need a moment." These words protect your dignity without fueling the fire. Ask yourself gently, how do I want my family to remember me in difficult moments? As someone who loses balance, or as someone who brings steadiness when others cannot? It is not about suppressing your emotions, but about channeling them in a way that preserves your peace. And remember, it takes practice. Calm strength is like a muscle. You build it over time with patience and care. If these reflections resonate with you, make sure you subscribe so you won't miss the next pieces of gentle wisdom that can support you on this journey.
A son-in-law's sharp tone or dismissive words may feel directed at you, but often they are born from his own stress, insecurity, or the weight of expectations he carries. Recognizing this does not excuse the behavior, but it can soften the sting and help you respond with wisdom instead of bitterness. Consider how many pressures people of younger generations live under today. Financial struggles, work demands, the constant presence of technology, and the unspoken weight of trying to prove themselves. Sometimes that pressure leaks out in unhealthy ways. When you are the recipient of that overflow, it feels personal, but often it is not. The human body also plays its part. With age, our nervous system changes. Medical research shows that cortisol, the stress hormone, stays longer in the bloodstream as we grow older. This means that when you experience conflict, your body may hold on to that stress more intensely and for a longer period than it once did. What might have felt like a small argument in your 40s can now leave you unsettled for hours or even days in your 70s. This is not weakness, it is simply biology reminding you that your body requires gentler care now. Knowing this, you can begin to separate the layers: his stress from your sensitivity, his frustration from your dignity. A man's harsh words might be the echo of his own unhealed wounds, while your strong reaction may be amplified by the way aging bodies process stress. Understanding both sides does not remove the hurt, but it helps you carry it with less weight. I recall George, an 80-year-old grandfather who once shared his story. His son-in-law often dismissed his opinions about family matters, brushing him off with phrases like, "That's old-fashioned." At first, George felt insulted, believing he was being deliberately disrespected. But after observing quietly, he noticed that his son-in-law used the same impatient tone with his own children when work had left him exhausted. George realized that the behavior was less about him and more about the younger man's struggle to cope with his own life pressures. With that shift in perspective, George still set boundaries, but he also stopped carrying the same level of personal hurt. You might ask yourself, is my son-in-law's tone truly about me, or is it a mirror of his inner battles? Am I reacting to his words or to the heightened sensitivity that naturally comes with aging? These are gentle questions, not to dismiss your feelings, but to help you find clarity. Sometimes the greatest relief comes from understanding that you are not the cause of another person's storms. By choosing to see the bigger picture, you give yourself the gift of freedom, the freedom to hold on to your dignity even when others falter. True peace often requires boundaries, and boundaries, though sometimes uncomfortable, are an act of self-respect rather than punishment. They are not walls to shut others out forever, but doors with locks that you hold the key to. You decide when and how they open, and in doing so, you teach others how to treat you. Many people fear setting boundaries because they think it will create more conflict. But the truth is, when expressed with calmness and clarity, boundaries actually reduce conflict over time. They give everyone in the family a clear understanding of what is acceptable and what is not. Think of it as gently guiding a river into its natural course, rather than letting it overflow and cause damage. If your son-in-law speaks to you harshly, you have every right to let him know how it affects you. The most effective way to do this is to wait for a calm moment when emotions have cooled. Then, instead of blaming, use I statements. You might say, "I feel hurt when I am spoken to in that tone." These words shift the focus from accusation to personal truth. They are less likely to provoke defensiveness and more likely to open space for understanding. After you've expressed your feelings, it's important to set a gentle but firm limit. You could continue by saying, "If this happens again, I will need to step away from the conversation." Notice how this approach does not escalate the tension. You are not threatening, you are simply explaining your decision to protect your own well-being. Consistency is key here. Each time the behavior occurs, repeat your action without anger. Over time, your steadiness sends a clear message: your dignity is not negotiable. I once knew Clara, 78, who struggled with a son-in-law who often dismissed her opinions during family gatherings. At first, she either argued back or stayed silent, neither of which brought her peace. Eventually, she tried a new approach. In a calm moment, she told him, "I value our conversations, but when I'm interrupted, I feel disregarded. If it happens again, I'll simply pause my part of the discussion." The next time he interrupted, she stopped talking, folded her hands, and waited. At first he laughed, but when he noticed the silence linger, he grew thoughtful. Over weeks, his interruptions lessened, not because Clara scolded him, but because she had drawn her boundary with quiet consistency. Ask yourself gently, what is the line that protects my peace? Am I willing to communicate it calmly and repeat it without anger? These questions are not about creating distance, but about ensuring that respect flows in both directions. Boundaries, when held with kindness, are not acts of division, but acts of love, for yourself and for the family as a whole. They allow relationships to grow in healthier soil, where dignity is preserved and true closeness can eventually take root. There comes a moment when you realize that no matter how much effort you put into guiding, explaining, or correcting, you cannot control another person's choices. This truth can be painful, especially when it involves someone who is married into your family. You may long for his respect, for a softer tone, for words that carry kindness instead of sharpness. But wisdom whispers that peace is not always found in changing others. It is often found in how you choose to carry yourself when they do not change. Many people believe that respect must always come from the outside, as if your value depends on how others see you. But that is a myth. True dignity begins within. When you respect yourself, your time, your feelings, your wisdom, you radiate a quiet strength that others eventually notice. They may still falter, they may still speak out of turn, but your steadiness becomes like a lighthouse on a stormy shore, guiding without shouting, shining without asking for permission. I once met Rosa, an 81-year-old woman who had struggled for years with a dismissive son-in-law. At family gatherings, he would often ignore her words or cut her off. She tried at first to argue back, then later to retreat into silence, but neither gave her peace. One day, she decided to shift her focus. Instead of waiting for his respect, she chose to give it to herself. She began small rituals, a quiet walk in the morning, a journal where she wrote down her wisdom, conversations with friends who valued her presence. Slowly, she felt her dignity grow from the inside. I realized, she told me, that his behavior no longer defined my worth. I could carry myself with grace, whether he saw it or not. And with time, something changed. Her son-in-law softened, perhaps sensing the strength she now carried. But even if he had not, Rosa had already found her peace. Ask yourself gently, where do I still wait for others to give me what I could already give myself? Do I believe that my self-respect depends on the moods of those around me? These are tender questions, not meant to criticize, but to help you remember that you have power, even when others forget to honor it. Sometimes the wisest choice is acceptance, not the kind of acceptance that means giving up, but the kind that means choosing serenity over constant struggle. When you stop demanding respect and start embodying it, you discover that your peace no longer depends on another person's behavior.
Your dignity becomes a steady flame, not easily shaken by passing winds. If these words brought you comfort, consider subscribing so you can continue receiving reflections like this. And tell me in the comments, what is one way you have found peace in difficult family moments?